So without further ado, please welcome to the stage of the rappel, Ewan McGregor.
Thank you. Hello, thank you very much. That was a nice welcome. Thank you for having me. Oh, I just got off a plane from London, so I feel sort of like I'm swimming in front of you, so you'll forgive me if I witter on and on. But it's a great pleasure to be here tonight, and it's a great honor, and I'm so proud of the film that you're going to watch, which, as you said, is the first film that I have directed, feature film that I've directed. And I worked with some extraordinary people, Gary Lucchese and Eric Rita at the back from Lakeshore, one of the wonderful producers that supported me so greatly here. And you'll see the incredible performances from the extraordinary cast that I was lucky enough to lead through this film. And David Strathairn will be joining us afterwards for a quick Q&A. I'm happy to say that I've got some family in the audience tonight somewhere. Where is she? There she is. Hello. Woohoo! My cousin Sandra, and I have some friends from France. Celine, someone? Yay! There we are. So it's a family affair for me too. So without any further ado, oh, and also this is very much the United States premiere of American Pastoral, because it's never been shown here before. Yes. We brought it home. Okay, enjoy the film, and I'll speak to you afterwards. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank
you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage, Ewan McGregor.
What do you do? Well, first of all, receive a little praise, if you wouldn't mind. So our spotlight programs were really designed to acknowledge filmmakers, artists, whether they're in early, mid, or late career, for a particular achievement or a particular notable moment in their lives. So when an actor who's had such a rich, creative life turns his talents to directing, we think it's time to celebrate. So we would like to honor you with the Mill Valley Film Festival Award.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's really beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very moved. Thank you. It's a great, like I said before, it's just a great pleasure for me to be out in front of this film. You know, it's I have to pinch myself that I did it, that I got the opportunity to do it, and that here I am in front of it, and I'm so very proud of it, and everybody's work in it, you know, and the collaboration that is making a movie was as thrilling creatively as I hoped it would be. You know, I really had high hopes for being involved in a story from the very beginning to the very end, and all of those incredible creative relationships that you have with the designers, the production designer Dan Clancy, Lindsay McKay, the costume designer, Judy Chin, the makeup designer, Jason Sika, the hair designer, and then my good friend Martin Rua, who is the cinematographer, all of the cast, Melissa Kent, the wonderful editor, and all of those creative relationships and conversations were just as thrilling as I hoped they would be, you know, and filled me up. And so anyway, so I thank you for that, and for all of them. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, cheers. Thank you. What's in these?
These are...
Is that a special brew?
Yeah, this is a special
for the
homegrown
jet-lagged actor.
It's 30% alcohol. No.
Is it?
It's water.
Okay. Oh, never mind then.
And you can keep this.
Oh, that's a very nice cup. I'd rather have this, I think.
Yeah, it's heavy, isn't it?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's.
Thank you.
It was a piece of art that we incorporated as the award.
Right.
So I'm glad you like it,
I do.
and we are just honored to give it to you.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, obviously, American Pastoral and your role as director. I understand that you were initially attached as an actor, but not the director. And like most films, they take a long time to make. What happened during that period, and how did you wind up directing this particular film? I presume this is something you always wanted to do.
Yes. We've just been doing press in Europe, and in Britain, somebody showed me a video of a television show that I did after Trainspotting, so that was 20 years ago, and it was with a guy, Chris Evans, on a show called TFI Friday, and it was my first live ever interview, and I swore on it, and I broke all the rules, and but anyway, at the end of this interview, a journalist showed it to me, and they said, "Where do you see yourself in 20 years?" And the 20-year younger version of me says, "I'll be directing and acting." Rather arrogantly, I said that. I didn't realize it was going to take me 20 years to be actually in that situation, but here I am. I have wanted to do it for that long. I felt like a filmmaker for that long. I think as an actor, I've always felt I am part of the filmmaking process, and I've always made it my business to be interested in how what the director, what he or she is deciding to do with the camera. I have learnt to be instinctive about lenses, and I act for I act on the stage, and if I'm doing theatre or if I'm on a film set, I'm acting for a camera, and I understand I understand the nature of acting for a camera from my experience. So I feel like being an actor is part of the filmmaking team, and therefore a filmmaker. So this felt like a very natural next step to me, but I never wanted to do it unless I really had a story that I was burning to tell, a story that I didn't want to do it just for the sake of it, so I could put actor, director on my business card, which I can now do. I'll give you one all later.
Yes, I was going to say, I'd like to see that card.
but I thought it was important to really need to tell a story. So in those 20 years, I only ever found two ideas. One was a novel written by an Italian novelist, and one was a documentary that was made. And both the first one I got the fear and didn't pursue. The novelist, when the rights reverted back to him, and I had an opportunity to go to Italy to try and persuade him that I would be the guy to make his novel into a movie. And at that point he did an interview and he said, "Only a master filmmaker will adapt my novel to the big screen." And so I just let those words sink deeply in. And it talked me out of it. I got the fear, and I thought, well, I'm not a master filmmaker. Why should I do it? And who's going to care if I do it? And la la la. And so I always regretted it. The film was made, and I wished I'd made it. I still wished I'd made it. And then there was
Did you say what that film?
It was a book called Silk, and it was made some years ago. Michael Pitt played in it, and I can't remember who else was in it. I'm afraid Keira Knightley. That's right. But it's a film I really felt like I fell in love with the story. I wished I'd made that. And then the documentary was a documentary called Deep Water, which was another maybe unwise first-time director gig, because it was about a man alone at sea. It was about the first non-stop round-the-world solo yacht race in the late 60s. It's a brilliant story, and the documentary's well worth a watch. Deep Water, it's called. So in those 20 years or 18 years, however long it's been, I only found two stories that I really wanted to, that I felt like I needed to tell. And when this film, I'd been attached to this film for some years, when I felt like it was slipping away, it had had a few starts and stops. I mean, before I came on, it had had many more. But while I was attached to it over those 3 or 4 years, we had a couple of start dates that didn't occur. And late in 2014, I certainly felt that the film was going to slip away and not be made. And it was at that point that I had a long discussion with my wife Ev, and she was the one really that said, you should do it. You should think about directing it. And I had a long chat with my agent about it, and then I was doing a play in New York, and we had Mondays off. So on the Monday, I said, okay, give me Monday, and I'm gonna think about it then, because I was doing a play. I couldn't get my head around it really. So on the Monday, I made a big pot of coffee, and I sat down with my script. I was alone in New York, and I just turned all day. I sat with the script, and I just read every scene, and I tried to see myself as the Swede, and I was trying to be honest with myself. Do I think I can play this role, and do I have the bigger picture in my head? Do I see the movie, and do I think it should be me that directs it? And by the end of the day, I was so excited about it, and I phoned Tom Rosenberg at Lakeshore and spoke with Gary Lucchese and suggested that they think about me doing it. And very quickly after that, I became the director.
It's fantastic. I was just thinking as an aside, I was thinking that, of course, there's a lot of actors who become directors, and certainly a number of them who have directed themselves, but not that many who have played a part that aged as long as you. And I started thinking, well, who else was that? And I came up with Orson Welles. So
yeah, I'm in good company then.
You are in good company.
Yes.
Now, for me, the 60s was a seminal period that affected my life. And I joke, and I say this is somewhat as a joke. I have the highest respect for this profession, but if it wasn't for the 60s, I probably likely would have been an attorney. And it had a huge effect on me in many ways. And was it the 60s so much, or the Philip Roth novel that really engaged you so much in this story, or a combination of the two? Because you're younger than...
Yeah, I wasn't around. I was born in 71.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't here, and I wasn't here.
Right.
No, it was the relationship between the Swede and his daughter that grabbed me in. I've got 4 girls, and so I know an awful lot about the relationship between a dad and his daughter. And I think that's really what it must have been. I remember reading the script very clearly the first time I read it. I was shooting it was funny, another incredible American novelist, but I was making a pilot for HBO of Jonathan Franzen's novel, The Corrections, that HBO in their wisdom decided not to make. And I don't know why that was. I saw the pilot and it was beautiful. Anyway, it was very expensive, maybe that's what it was. But they decided not to make that. But while I was filming that in New York, I was given the script of American Pastoral to read, John Romano's script. And I'll never forget reading it. I mean, I read it and it moved me to tears. I remember reading the last page and just being so upset by it, And I think it's because I've got girls, and I know the idea of losing one of them like this was too much to bear, really. And in retrospect, now that I've been doing interviews for the last 3 weeks, and have been forced to rethink a lot of things that happened, and I can see now that when I read that script that day in New York, my eldest daughter Clara was probably 14 or 15, or maybe around about that age. So subconsciously or consciously, I must have been readying myself for her leaving the house, for her leaving home. She would have been, she's my eldest, so she's the first girl out of the nest, if you like. And I must have been considering that, even if I wasn't aware of it. And maybe that's why I was so attached to it, because that's a loss. I mean, it's a very mundane, ordinary, normal, my daughter's going to college loss, but still, you wake up in a house that she's not asleep in anymore, and it hurts you, so maybe I've seen that in this story throughout the experience that, yes, Roth's writing about this very extraordinary loss and a very strange one where it's like a death of a child without a death. And on top of that, the fear of where they are and not knowing who they're with and not having any say in being able to protect them but I can see lots of other things in it, and I think we always look for things that we recognize in art, and in this story I recognized lots of elements of bringing up kids. You know, it could just be a sort of an exploration of our children becoming teenagers and becoming difficult, and the sort of necessary pushing away of the parents. And Roth doesn't have children. This is the other incredible thing, that Roth's not a father. He's written this incredible book about really how it feels between a husband and wife, and between a father and a daughter and a mother and a daughter, and it's all incredibly accurate, I find.
I know, when I just walked in at the end scene with you with Mary, and it's heart-wrenching. It is, and I'm a father of 2 daughters, and I know exactly how you feel, and that's the heart and soul really of this story, the film that you made. And I know even when they they go away from college and they're not around, but when they come home, it's like, well, what time are you coming home? Dad, been out on my own forever, but you never lose that. Never lose it.
No. Yes, I've got 3 more to go, so I'm
God.
enjoying every moment while it lasts. Yeah.
And in terms of the casting of the film, I mean, with Dakota Fanning, did that have something you were thinking about?
Dakota and Jennifer were cast when I was, right from the start. So my first job as the director, I'd met Dakota while I was doing this play in New York, because I knew I was going to be playing her dad. So I arranged to meet her, and we had coffee and got on very well. And then some weeks later, I became the director. And so I had to go and meet Jennifer, who I'd never met, and Dakota. And my first sort of responsibility as the director was to ask them to stay, because there was no, I was now the director, there was no guarantee that they might, And I sat with Dakota for 5 minutes, we had coffee, and she was like, yeah. And I went to see Jennifer, who I'd never met, and I'm so in awe of her work. She's such an extraordinary actress. And I sat down with her, and we immediately fell into a very amazing, deep discussion about the novel, and about how she questioned me about how I saw certain things, and having been nervous about it, of course. And it's sort of my larger experience of this as an actor directing for the first time was, of course, we started talking like 2 actors, discussing character and discussing the storyline and scenes, and I needn't have had any worries about it. I spoke from my heart, and I was honest about how I saw things, and that's exactly how it was on set as well.
They must have appreciated having a director who was an actor who could empathize with them 100%.
Yes. Well, I think so. I mean, I can only think that way. I can only think like an actor. And I set up this, and I wanted to shoot it like that. I was inspired by films where the acting is front and center, if you like. I was inspired by films like the Russian film Leviathan, and there's a movie, I don't know if it's a Danish film, I'm not sure. Force Majeure is another film where you have frames that hold for long periods of time, and the acting is what's telling us the story. I mean, the beautiful design, and when the camera does move, it moves for a reason. And I couldn't be quite as brave as that in this film. I couldn't be just as sort of stark, if you like, with the way we shot the film. But I would have liked to have been. I mean, I was inspired to be that, because I think you allow then the actors to tell the story. So when we would get on set, we would always rehearse alone. So I learned that from my very early days working with Danny Boyle, who rehearsed that way. He would clear the set before every new scene, and we would rehearse alone. And so but in this case, it was an odd thing, because I'd say, okay, it's clear the set. It's just a time for the director and the actor or actors to rehearse. And then everyone would leave, and I'd shut the door, and it was just me and Jennifer, or me and Dakota. It was a funny. I was looking over my shoulder for the director before I realized that it was me.
The buck stops here.
Yeah. But what was wonderful about that was I had an idea for, I would say, 98% of the scenes. And during the preparation period, I think if you're going to be in front of the camera and directing, you want to make sure your prep's really, really solid. You don't want to be having any last-minute huge decisions to be made other than just how the scene is going to be played. And so I had ideas for all the scenes. I sat in the prep period with Martin Ruhr, the DP, for maybe 2 weeks, and because I'd found all the locations with Dan Clancy, and I'd been in all those locations, I'd spent a lot of time in them, and during that process of looking for the right places, the factory or the house, of course you were imagining the scenes in those spaces. So I had already imagined them, and so I sat down with Martin, and I drew, we drew up literally like a floor plan of the room. And maybe one example would be the scene with Dakota when I come back with the award. So, I just drew the room up and the 2 windows and the door, and I said, okay, I can imagine that I would stand in the door, and that window, it would look beautiful if she's sitting in that window, so let's put her in the window. And then at some point I will cross to the bed, and maybe she joins me in the bed, and then at the end of the scene I leave, and we'll end on her. And in that case, when we came to rehearse it, I would always start with that. I'd always say to the actors, once I'd shut the door and we were alone, I'd say, this is what I thought, this is what I'd imagined. So let's start there. And it was always just an idea. I would never wanted to put the actors in a position where I was telling them. I mean, there was a couple of shots where you've dreamed a shot up, and you are saying, look, just for this shot, I want you to just be here so we see this, or sunset, or whatever it is. But most of the scenes, I would just say, okay, this is my idea. Let's start with that. And and in that case, we did it once, and it was Dakota's first scene that she shot in the movie. It was the first time I'd heard her stutter. It was the first time I met Mary, really, and we rehearsed it exactly as I'd drawn it up with Martin. And I looked at her and she went, yep, that's good. And that was it. So we just shot it that way. It worked. And in other instances, like one instance would be I remember the FBI in the kitchen scene, where the scene with Dolan and Dawn, and then I joined them at the end. Well, I had that imagined just in one end of the kitchen, because we had a few scenes up in the kitchen end of the kitchen, and I thought we'll just play it down there. But when we rehearsed it was really dull. It felt quite static, and it was Jennifer, in fact, who said it doesn't feel. I'm so full of panic. It just feels too still. And it was Jennifer that said, let's try and use the whole kitchen. And in that case, we did, and it was much better. It was a much better idea. So I think that I have no idea what your question was now. I can't remember.
It doesn't really matter.
But that's how we went about it all the time. And I think for the actors, it made everybody feel really. I know from experience that that's how I work best, because I feel like I'm bringing myself to I'm making decisions. I'm involved in what feels right and wrong about how we play those scenes. And if you're just told what to do, stand here and then go over there, you're not using all of your creativity, and therefore you're not doing your best work.
So these changes that came up and the suggestions and working it out, was that during the rehearsal period, or both when you were you blocking it during the rehearsal period, or
No, this was just rehearsing before we shot it.
Wow.
We didn't have any. We had some table reading sessions before in a rehearsal period, if you like, but this was just what we did on set.
It was interesting when you were talking about how you would use these shots and that were the people moving in and out, or not. You didn't say necessarily moving in and out of the shot, but letting the camera stay still, and the resonance it has, and it reminded me of Victorio De Sica, like in Italian neorealism, whether it's the bicycle thief or 2 women, the power of that within the frame.
Yeah.
Was that anything you had?
Well, I just love it. I mean, it's not. You can find examples of it all over. I find that that's what I felt this story needed. Yeah. I don't feel like it's my style, or I just felt it was the style that this film needed. For this story, that's what it should look like. That's what I felt,
Well,
with Martin and I, when we were planning it, the other good thing that happens about having an idea like that is even if the blocking changes, even if, when we rehearse it, it completely changes. And maybe I'm sitting in the window and Dakota's standing in the doorway. It doesn't matter, in that you've already discussed with your DP, your cinematographer, how the scenes should feel. And the movie is, if you like, a piece of music, and there's bits of it where you want a scene to have pace, and there's other bits where you want maybe a little pause, and the scene in the dining room, for instance, would be one of those where I wanted to shoot it in one go, one shot. And it was a slightly longer scene than you see here, the one after we meet Dakota, where Dawn is saying, who is she? I don't recognize her. Is it me? Am I a bad mother? That I just wanted to be in one shot. And those are decisions that Martin and I made during that process, where you were sort of making the shape of the movie, if you like, you know. And other scenes where you know, well, we want to have more coverage here. We want to have shots to cut back and forward to create pace or unease or whatever it be.
Shall we open it up for some questions
Yes.
from the audience?
Exactly.
Yeah, there, the gentleman way in the back. Shout it out, please.
Congratulations on your work. It was an enjoyable film.
Thank you.
My two questions. What are your feelings? I'll probably speak loud enough. What are your feelings on the CFI and the Mill Valley Film Festival in general? And my other question is, who was the DP?
The tough questions are coming now.
And who was the DP? And had you worked with him or her at any time in the past? Thank you.
So the question was, what do you think of CFI, the California Film Institute, the parent company, the nonprofit of the Mill Valley Film Festival and the Mill Valley Film Festival? I can't even remember the last question. No, and the DP as well. Who was the DP?
Who was the DP and had you worked?
No, I was just kidding. I did remember.
Yeah. Well, the festival I'm very happy to be at. I was here once before with
the
Salmon Fishing in the Yemen, is that right?
Yes, you were during the year. It wasn't during the festival, but you were here in this theater.
In this theatre. So it's a great pleasure to be here. It's not a part of the world that I know very, very well, other than that and one motorcycle ride through your great city on the way north with my father once that we did with some of his friends. But I'm really proud to be here in California with the film, and it is the first time we've shown it in the States. So that's good. I don't know about the CSI or CFR or what. It's a great TV show. I love it. I hope to be in it when I'm in my
CSI San Rafael.
50s, mid-50s probably. I'll try and get a role in that so I can just stay at home. CFI Brentwood. That's what it'll be called.
It could be a franchise.
Yeah. And Martin Rua I had not worked with before, no. I had a sort of short list of 3 DPs that I really liked. One of whom I'd worked, the other 2 I'd worked with before. And one of them I'd worked with twice. And then Martin's work I knew from Control, the film that he made with Anton Corbijn, which was extraordinary piece of cinematography, a great movie. And his work was beautiful in that. And then there was in the American he shot with Anton as well, which was beautiful. But it was, funnily enough, it was a little film that he made that sort of clinched it for me, because he made a film called Harry Brown, which was a small indie British film, and it was sort of a cute idea, I suppose. It was about an old age pensioner in a council estate in South London or East London who became a vigilante and took on the sort of local yobbos from the local estate and beat them. And it was a sort of cute idea. But at the beginning of the film is somebody's iPhone on the back of a scooter moped, and they're driving around the council estate, and then you see them shoot somebody. And it's just violent and handheld, and it's literally shot on someone's phone. And then you cut to, there's about 8 shots that introduce us to Michael Caine, who plays the lead, who plays the old age pensioner. So the first shot is him waking up in bed, and then he rolls over, and we're looking at the bed, we're looking at him on a bedside cabinet with a picture of a wife who's no longer with him, so we assume that she might have passed away. There's some pills, so we can see that he's on medication, he's maybe older. Then there's a shot underneath the bed as his feet come into frame. And then we go into the kitchen, and there's like 3 shots. There's a shot of him cooking his breakfast, and then there's a shot of him sitting at the table alone eating his breakfast, and then it cuts out quite wide. And there is an old man sitting alone in a kitchen eating his breakfast. And by the end of those 8 shots, I just thought, that's who I need. That's the man I want to shoot it. Because of the storytelling of it. These shots didn't move. There was no tricky camera moves. They were just cuts, hard cuts from one shot to the next. And I felt like within those 8 shots, I knew all about this man. I felt like I'd been introduced to him without any words. And I thought I wanted somebody who could teach me about storytelling with the camera. And he was absolutely that man. And also, when I met him, I've experienced, as an actor, working with a first-time director, because I've worked with quite a few first-time directors in my day. And I've seen sometimes what can happen with a first-time director's naivety or inexperience, that it can get on the director of photography's nerves. And I've seen often the first-time director and the DP fall out, and then it's a horrible atmosphere, and it's very difficult. It's a horrible atmosphere to work in, and it's difficult for the first-time director because they're trying to claw they want it to be their film, but the DP's more experienced, and it gets a terrible mess. And I knew that I couldn't afford that risk because I was going to be in front of his or her camera. I couldn't not be getting on with him and then step out in front of his lens to do my work. I couldn't do it. So I found somebody that I really felt like I would become my buddy, my partner. And Martin was just absolutely that, completely. Even when we were rushing, even when we were losing the light, the scene when I'm running through the traffic at night in New York, we did too much work on that night. We had too much to do, and we didn't quite really have enough time to shoot that sequence. So we were really running. We were doing our take on each shot, and the light was coming up in half an hour. And even then, when the shit was properly hitting the fan, he was still absolutely my guy, and inclusive, and never lost his temper when I made some really silly suggestions.
Other questions? Yes, over here. How about the woman and then the gentleman after?
And,
yeah. Peter Riga, yeah. I did. I mean, Peter's name was mentioned. Deb Aquila was our casting director, and she mentioned his name really early on. And I've got history with Peter Riga because my uncle is an actor. Dennis Lawson is his name, and he played in a movie called Local Hero in the 80s. Quite right. And Peter Riga was, so my uncle played the hotel manager who brokers the deal, Gordon Urquhart.
Glad you didn't say Animal House, though.
No. And then Riga, of course, plays the oil man that comes over to buy Furness, to buy the village. And so although I didn't really know Peter personally then, he's been part of my, because that film, I must have watched it 100 times with my brother, and because it was my uncle in this movie, and we went to that beach every summer, we camped on the beach, and Local Hero was a real part of my personal history, if you like, and so therefore so was Riga. And when his name was mentioned, I couldn't think of anybody else to play my dad. And I went to meet him in New York and asked him if he would consider it, and he was incredibly enthusiastic from the very word go till now. You know, he's been a real passionate supporter of the movie. He loved being in it. He was so interesting about his thoughts about the book and about Lou, and he's a great talker, Peter. So we could talk for hours and hours about it. So he was a you know, there's nobody else I could imagine in there.
That's great. There was a gentleman.
Yeah, I just wanted to say there were so many great performances, and you know, I think when you see so many great performances in one movie, it's very telling as to the quality of the direction. So I just wanted to compliment you in that way, and also ask about the kids. They were such good actors,
yes.
Such good child actors, and I was wondering how you found them, and also how you worked with them on motivation for such difficult subject matter.
It's interesting. I almost don't really know. I mean, I read with lots of girls. I read with lots of 7-year-old Marys, and probably 8 or 9, 12, 13-year-old Marys. And it's interesting with children because they come in and they'll have practiced it, and often they can have quite a good read on it. And what you want to see is that they can change it. You know, will they be able to take direction? Will you be able to? And often not. Often a child's sort of understanding of it is maybe given to them by an adult or something. Maybe they've got a coach or their parents or whoever's reading with them can maybe shape the performance that they're giving. And they may be quite good, but maybe not really understand it. So what I was looking for was, we were limited because we knew that she had to become Dakota Fanning, so we had to find somebody that looked like she could end up being Dakota Fanning, which I think both of the girls do. And the little girl Ocean was just fantastic, and she was able to sort of improvise, and she could look really happy, and I mean her job really was to just be happy and lovely, and but also have the stutter. So I practiced with that with them, and she was by far the best girl that I read with. And then Hannah was amazing. I think she was 13 years old when we shot with her, and of course the most complex scene for her was the one in the truck, the "Kiss Me Daddy" scene, and of course it's a very important scene, and I really felt that in the novel there's something very, very essential about that scene for the Swede later to look back on, and he's racking himself to find the reason why he was to blame, and he really reflects on that moment and her witnessing the monk burning. In the novel, those are two big things for the Swede that he feels bad about and guilty about, and thinks that maybe if it had been different, she wouldn't have turned. He's just trying to blame himself really somehow. But that scene in the cab is quite difficult, and I remember I didn't want to put anything in her head that I didn't know what her. I mean, I spoke to her parents about it, obviously, her mum, but I didn't want to put anything in a child's mind that wasn't already there. So I didn't. I just wanted to see how she played it. And when we got in the cab and we shot her side first, she was just so amazing. I mean, whatever her understanding of that moment is, I don't know, but it was perfect for what we needed, I think. And when you couple it with my reaction to it, it makes something very important for the movie, and something that was obviously very important for Philip Roth in the novel.
That's a great scene. There's so many great cast members, and David Strathairn, but the young, not that young a girl, but the young woman who played the radical, was that
Valerie Curry?
Valerie?
Yeah. The actress name is Valerie Curry, and the character is Rita Cohen.
Rita Cohen, yes. Yeah. She was tremendous.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
So that was a difficult part to cast. I mean, I read again with an awful lot of actors for that role, and I felt like we were getting, I mean, Gary will remember, we got to the day where I think we all knew it was the day we had to make a choice. And there was I read with some really, really good actors, and there was never that's the interesting thing about casting, is there was many of the girls who read really well and could quite easily have been Rita, other than I just didn't feel like I'd met her yet. I felt like I hadn't met Rita. She hadn't walked in the room. And although some of the actors were very skilled and talented, I didn't feel that any of them really were right. And we got to the day where we were reviewing some of our tapes, some of the auditions that I'd done with people, and I was very close to making the wrong decision, to going with somebody who in my gut, I didn't think was 100% right. She was our favorite of everybody, I guess, but I didn't think it was Rita Cohen. And just at that moment, Deb Aquila, casting director, went, "Oh, there's this." And she put on a DVD, and she didn't really introduce it in any way, and Valerie's self-tape came up. She was doing a film in Vancouver, and she had pink hair. And she didn't show it to us earlier, Deb, because she'd done her first audition in pink with a self-tape with pink hair. And she was worried that we might not be able to see past the pink hair and just think that she was wrong. So she'd asked her to do it again. So she'd gone to some trouble. Her makeup and hair department on the film she was doing in Vancouver had given her a wig, and they'd dressed her so we couldn't see her pink hair at all. And as soon as she started, I went, "Oh, well, that's her. That's Rita Cohen right there." There was no question, and we all felt the same, the producers and I. So, and then I got to have a look at the one that she did with pink hair, and that was maybe even better. So, but she's an amazing actor, and what's really incredible about that character is that really it's like meeting four different people, that she presents four different sides of herself, and it's not until the very end when she says, "Look after her," that I think we see who she really is. She sort of play acts these different people, and it's only down to Valerie's skill as an actor that they are all Rita Cohen. It doesn't feel like 4 like random people. It's all her, but somehow just 4 different sides of herself. She's a brave actor, and what we did in the hotel room is exposing and vulnerable, I suppose, to an extent for her, and she was very brave with it. It was my intention never to have nudity in that scene. I wanted to try and achieve that scene with her clothed, because I think it's more effective, and there's too much of that, really. What she's doing is more shocking because she's clothed. I think if she'd been in underwear or topless or whatever, it would have spoilt that scene, really. So
No, it worked really well. Yeah, it was a great scene. Anyone over here? I'm sorry. Yes, gentlemen.
First of all, I want to let you know that I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and I went to high school in the late 50s, and I went to Eastside High School in Weequahic, happened to be one of our competitors, and there was a guy that played football. He wasn't a Swede, but he kind of looked like that. And
Yeah.
I just want to throw that out. My question had to do with Philip Roth. Was Philip Roth involved in the production at all?
Philip Roth, first of all, there was a Swede. He did write about a real man called the Swede who went to Weequahic High, who was a tall, fair-haired Jewish sports star called the Swede. And the real Swede was Jewish. Yeah, and maybe it was in the late 40s there was a guy called the Swede who Roth based the character on. His daughter didn't blow up a post office but he did use the figure, and then to this day in Weequahic High there's a cabinet with his trophies in it. That's true. So that's interesting. But Philip Roth signed off on the script. I think the producers, Lakeshore, had made two movies with him in the past, Elegy and The Human Stain. And so he had obviously approval over the script that John Romano wrote and signed off on that back in the early 2000s, I think. And then didn't have any other input in the movie. But we got an email from him that he'd sent it to his agent, and then told his agent to share it with us about his thoughts about the film, which were very, very nice. And he liked the film very much, so we were very happy about that.
Did Peter give you any tips on playing a Swede, somebody called the Swede who was Jewish?
Peter Regan?
Yes.
No, not really, no. I mean, we had this bond, like I say, so it's one of my favorite shots at the end when I sit down next to him on the sofa, on the outside at the end, and he's looking at me like that, and I put my hand on his knee and I get him a drink. That's one of my favorite. I just don't know, there's such history in it somehow between the two of us. It's nice. I believe us as father and son.
Yeah, it's very believable. Very great. Gentleman right here.
Hey, I was wondering if you could ask, if Ashley Coffey can ask you, if she can ask you a question.
Yeah?
Yeah, Ashley.
Are you representation for her?
I'm her agent.
Ashley, what would you like to ask?
Sorry, it's my little brother. What was something about post-production that you really enjoyed, and something, if anything, that surprised you?
Post-production?
Yes.
I love the edit. I found the edit to be really exciting. I made a short film in the 90s, and that was my only other sort of directing experience. I found it just to be an amazing process. And Melissa Kent is a wonderful editor and was a wonderful partner in that with me. And I learned a great deal, and I've just found it incredible what you can do, you know. And it taught me a lot about acting, in fact, for film, knowing how things go together now and what's possible, taking lines of dialogue from one take. And, you know, 'cause sometimes you like the way an actor says a line in one take, but you like the visual or the cars in the wrong, something, you know, it's very much about taste. But you can do wonders. You can mix things around. If you want to cut, one of our scenes was very, very long, and it was quite near the very the very early scene, the interrogation scene with Lou and Dawn, was much longer. And it was very tricky at the very beginning of a film with the characters we don't know very well yet to have a scene of such length. And so we trimmed that down. And when you're trimming down a scene in the edit, you know, you obviously on paper you decide which lines you need to stay, which lines you want to trim out. But then taking them out is a bit like a chess game. You know, you can be on this shot to get rid of that line, and then you need a reaction, and you can take a reaction from somewhere else, and you can really. It's really interesting, the edit. And I suppose because I've been thinking in shots for 24 years, however long I've been acting, that's how I think when I'm working. I'm aware of what the camera's doing, and I think that way. I had to sort of turn my brain round. I realized with Martin, I kept making the mistake of, you know, if you're walking and the camera's in front of you, the camera's leading you. And if the camera's behind you, it's following you. And I would always say it the wrong way round. And he'd look at me like, I'd say, so when you're following us, and he'd go, no, leading. And I realized it's because I'm thinking towards the camera all the time. My brain for 20 years, has been thinking towards the camera, and to describe things from the camera's perspective, it took me a little while to turn my brain round. So anyway, the edit was amazing. And then the thing I knew the least about, I suppose, is sound design, and how amazingly important that is, and what an effect it has, and changing the room, just the tone of a room, or how loud should the leaves and the wind in the leaves be, or you do a sort of a huge sound mix at the end. So everything you hear is there because we decided it should be there. None of it's there by accident. Very often you take the sound of the room as it actually was away, and you replace it with something else, so you can really manipulate how it makes you feel with using the sound. And that would be the area of the process that I knew the least about, or had the least experience in. And it's like a million decisions that the sound mix is like 5 decisions every 5 seconds. Like that cow should be no, no, that's it. And then the cow should be maybe over there. No, put it over there. No, make it louder, softer. Okay, and the bird should be here. Not that bird. No. Yeah, that one. And that should be there. And then it's endless. And it's just taste. It's funny. It's just taste, you know. Your sound mixer, your sound designer gives you all these options, and then it's just your taste, really, what you think feels right.
You know, when I hear you talk about this, I see the passion in your voice, and the expressions on your face, and the sparkle in your eye, and I can really tell how much you love this process of directing. And I know we are the beneficiary of that passion, because we will see more from you as a director, and hopefully, certainly, of course, as an actor. So I want to thank you, Ewan, for sharing this great film with us.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for staying. Cheers.
You can take your top.